In the previous lectures of this module, we explored how evolution sometimes is powerless, how it is prevented from happening even if there is a benefit to be obtained, simply because of, for example, contingencies. Evolution is limited to using the material that history has handed down. Or because of trade-offs, the same change may bring a benefit for one aspect of an organism's life, but a disadvantage for another aspect. In this module, we will see how these and other limitations can sometimes lead to evolutionary inertia, when organisms show non-evolution. One famous type of example of evolutionary inertia are so-called living fossils, such as this Nautilus shell. The term living fossil is a bit confusing because it's not a fossil, it is the shell of a species that lives today. But it is very similar to its extinct relatives, other nautilus-like mollusks, nautiloids, that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. As you can see, the basic structure of the shell has hardly changed in all that time. Why this is the case we don't really know, but probably the way the shell functions was already perfected early in evolution and further improvements simply were not possible. This doesn't mean, of course, that those Cretaceous nautiloids were exactly identical to modern nautilus. Even though their shells were near identical, their bodies and behavior may have been very different. The nautiloids are an example of living fossils that show evolutionary inertia as a group. The family tree of nautiloids is huge, with thousands of species branching off over the millions of years that they have been around. And although different species differ in details of their shells, by and large the general shell shape remains the same. Even the 6 nautilus species that are still alive today are hard to tell apart. Now there's evolutionary inertia and evolutionary inertia. Nautiloids as a group have remained true to a very standardized blueprint for their shell, but the details differ, and there's no chance that a nautiloid of 100 million years ago could be mistaken by an expert for a present-day nautilus. There is, however, one living fossil that has changed so little over 100 million years that scientists would still place them in the same genus. Schizodactylus is a genus of crickets with stocky bodies and splayed feet that help them balance in the sand dunes and deserts where they live in Africa and Asia. But in 2011, scientists discovered that a Cretaceous fossil from Brazil could be assigned to the exact same genus. It has the same body shape and the same broad feet, and it is rare to find such a high degree of evolutionary inertia over such a long period of time. These were examples of long-term inertia, but we can also find the evolutionary inertia within a species on a much shorter time scale. Imagine a long-lived species with a generation time of 10 years. If changes in its environment take place at a smaller time scale, say a few warm years succeeded by a few cold years, the species may reproduce too slowly to adapt to these changes. By the time a new generation appears, the environment has already returned to its original state. So the offspring of individuals that survived well in warm years will be faced with cold years when they themselves are growing up, and vice versa. The net result will be an evolutionary flatliner. The species doesn't change. That's another kind of evolutionary inertia. In this module, I've shown you the limits of evolution. It's important to remember that no matter how powerful a process evolution is, there are still limits and boundaries to what it can achieve. And I've given you many examples of such limitations. But to really understand these, it's good to do an exercise. In the evolutionary literature, we can find many cases of so-called maladaptation. Species that apparently are not optimally adapted to the environment they live in. In the E-tivity, that is part of this module, we will see some of these examples and ask you to come up with explanations of why and how evolution may have been limited in these cases.